I allowed them to believe they had won, because anticipation is far more satisfying when reality hits hard. I handed them the sale documents with a practiced smile. "Here's everything you asked for," I said calmly. They leaned forward eagerly, scanning the papers, oblivious to the clauses hidden in plain sight. Each paragraph they skipped was a small reveal for the audience, hinting that something wasn't quite right. And then it was time. I leaned back and said softly, "Sign here, and you officially have the business, along with one tiny detail that I'm sure you'll appreciate." Their confident smirks lingered, completely unaware that the storm of humiliation and irony was about to hit. Marco and Adriana leaned over the documents, eyes scanning every line with smug confidence. They believed they were moments away from claiming Delgado Imports as their own. I sat back in my chair, sipping my coffee, letting the tension build. Every second stretched like hours. "Patience," I whispered internally. "Let them feel victory before it's ripped away." Finally, I pointed to a highlighted section in the contract. "As part of the sale agreement, the previous owner's children may be employed by the company at the discretion of the new management, starting at minimum wage." I watched their confident faces falter. Marco blinked, then read aloud, stuttering, Wait a minute. Minimum wage?" Adriana's hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide. You can't do this." "We thought we were getting control." I calmly explained. "I negotiated a fair sale to Prestige Imports. You'll have the chance to work here, just as you wanted. But perhaps now you'll understand what earning it truly means." Their faces were a mix of shock, humiliation, and anger. The irony was delicious. All the entitlement they had shown for years now worked against them, publicly and legally binding. Marco tried to argue, pointing at the other clauses. "This isn't fair." "We grew up in this business." I shook my head calmly. "You grew up thinking it was a right, not a responsibility. Now, you get to experience it the way everyone else does, starting at the bottom." Adriana sputtered, trying to negotiate. "We didn't sign up for this." I smiled knowingly. Every argument they made only reinforced their guilt and the lesson they desperately needed. As they stormed out of the office, muttering and panicked, I leaned back, savoring the moment. The storm wasn't over. The entire company, including staff and clients, now knew the story. This is just the beginning, I thought. They'll learn humility, respect, and the meaning of real work, and the world will watch. The morning after the clause reveal, Marco and Adriana showed up at Prestige Imports for their new roles. I watched from a distance as their confident strides faltered into uneasy steps. This was the moment they realized entitlement alone doesn't build a career or paychecks. They were immediately assigned basic tasks. Marco, once the self-proclaimed future CEO, was sorting shipments and checking inventory. Adriana, who prided herself on networking and style, was answering customer complaints at the front desk. The staff exchanged knowing glances. Some smirked, some whispered, "This is payback at its finest." Their expressions, shock, anger, and disbelief, were priceless. I checked in on them discreetly, recording notes and subtle videos for posterity. Marco grumbling, "This is beneath me. I shouldn't be doing this." Adriana fumbling with the phone, apologizing to customers she once ignored. Each small struggle was proof of their entitlement crashing into reality. A slow but inevitable lesson that they couldn't fake work ethic. I thought back to the countless times they had ignored my guidance. Marco, skipping early morning deliveries because he had more important things. Adriana leaving meetings abruptly to post selfies online. Now, they were experiencing the very frustrations, humiliation, and pressure I had endured for decades. For the first time, they felt the weight of responsibility. By the end of their first week, the competitor's staff had learned their story. Every client knew the tale of the entitled heirs humbled by fate. I smiled quietly from my office, coffee in hand, as I texted a subtle update to Prestige Imports. Lesson being learned. Keep notes. They'll understand respect soon enough. By the second week, the reality of their new positions had fully set in. Marco and Adriana were no longer the confident, entitled heirs. They were cogs in a machine they once thought was theirs by right. I watched quietly from my office window, savoring each small stumble. Sometimes the universe needs a little push, I whispered to myself. Their mistakes piled up quickly. Marco accidentally mislabeled shipments, causing a minor client complaint. Adriana mishandled a phone order, leaving a frustrated customer to hang up mid-call. After 40 years of building a business from nothing, I thought I'd finally enjoy my retirement, until my own children walked into my office demanding control, as if the sweat on my brow meant nothing. I sat behind my mahogany desk, staring at the faces of Marco and Adriana, my children, who thought a title and a fancy office were all it took to earn the legacy I had built from scratch. I am Victor Delgado, founder of Delgado Imports, a small import-export business specializing in Latin American goods. I arrived in Boston in the 1970s with nothing but a suitcase, a head full of ambition, and a promise to my family that I would make a better life for them. Through decades of long hours, sleepless nights, and personal sacrifice, I turned Delgado Imports into a thriving company. I did everything myself at first, negotiating with suppliers, managing shipments, even delivering orders personally. And through it all, I raised Marco and Adriana, hoping to instill work ethic, responsibility, and respect. But as the years went on, I noticed a worrying pattern: entitlement. Marco leaned back in the chair, smirking. "Dad, it's time to step aside. We should run the business. You're old, and we're ready." Adriana nodded, crossing her arms. "We've been loyal children. It's our inheritance. You don't need to worry. We can handle it." I listened quietly, letting them believe they had power. Inside, I was planning my response carefully because they didn't realize the lesson I was about to teach. As they continued talking, I smiled politely, nodding, and pretending to consider their proposal. But in my mind, I had already started thinking, they think they can inherit a lifetime of work without effort. Let's see how they handle reality when it comes with consequences. The storm of revenge was quietly brewing, and neither Marco nor Adriana had any idea how I was going to outsmart them completely. After Marco and Adriana left my office that day, I sat back in my chair, swirling a cup of strong Cuban coffee. On the surface, I seemed calm, almost contemplative. But inside, I was already plotting. They think they can inherit Delgado Imports without effort. Let's see how reality handles entitlement. Over the next few days, Marco and Adriana continued to pester me. Marco insisted on taking over marketing decisions immediately. Adriana argued that my retirement should mean handing over operational control now. I listened, nodded, and smiled politely, letting them believe they were winning. Every time they spoke, my mind raced with the perfect plan, a takeover that would publicly humble them and teach them the value of hard work, without them realizing it until it was too late. Secretly, I reached out to Prestige Imports, a competitor in New York, looking to expand into Boston. I explained my situation. I have a thriving family business, but my children are entitled and unprepared. I'm considering selling, but I want to include a clause ensuring they learn a lesson in humility. Prestige Imports loved the idea, and we drafted a contract clause. Marco and Adriana could work for the business after the sale, but only at minimum wage, reporting directly to Prestige's management. I saved this for the perfect moment, ensuring suspense for both my children and the eventual audience. To keep myself entertained, I began documenting their entitlement in subtle ways. Marco, refusing to answer simple operational questions. Adriana bragging about social media influence while ignoring real business responsibilities. Each observation was another brick in the wall of irony I was building. As I signed the preliminary sale papers with Prestige Imports, I smiled at the thought of my children walking into the office, confident and smug, completely unaware that the ultimate twist was already set in stone. They think they're inheriting a fortune. Little do they know the fortune is a lesson wrapped in irony. The day of the official transfer arrived. I woke early, brewed my coffee, and walked through my office like any normal business owner preparing for a routine meeting. Only this wasn't routine. It was the perfect setup. Marco and Adriana had been boasting all week about finally taking over. They were confident, arrogant, and completely unaware of what awaited them. I invited them into the boardroom, where the polished mahogany table and leather chairs made them feel important. Marco leaned back, smirking. "So, Dad, where's our corner office?" Adriana tapped her nails impatiently, grinning. "Finally, we'll run things our way." I smiled gently, nodding, pretending to deliberate. Every second of hesitation I displayed made them feel in control, which only heightened the suspense. While they spoke, I watched their body language carefully. Marco, exuding entitlement, clearly thinking he owned the room. Adriana whispering to him about future expansions without realizing I had already sold the business. The competitor's staff didn't hold back. Constructive feedback was firm, unfiltered, and entirely public in front of the team. Their faces, flushed with embarrassment, mirrored the shock of first-time responsibility. I documented every moment. Photos of Marco double-checking labels under supervision. Clips of Adriana apologizing profusely to clients she once ignored. I even posted subtle, anonymous updates online about a high-profile inheritance story going wrong. Nothing malicious, just enough to stir public interest and viral suspense. I thought about my decades of hard work and sacrifices, realizing this was more than revenge. My children had ignored the lessons I tried to teach. They had belittled my efforts and assumed success would be handed to them. Now they were learning humility the hard way, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. Finally, the scales were balanced. By the end of the day, news had spread through the company and local business circles. The heirs of Delgado Imports were working at minimum wage, fumbling through tasks they once scoffed at. I leaned back, coffee in hand, smiling quietly. And the world is watching. Next week, things get even more interesting. By the third week, word had spread beyond the office. Local business networks were buzzing, and social media whispers began circulating about the entitled heirs of Delgado Imports now working minimum wage positions at Prestige Imports. Marco and Adriana had no idea that their humiliation was about to go viral. The reality of public attention hit them hard. Clients who once admired them now shared their missteps online. Local business forums praised Prestige Imports' fairness, mocking Marco and Adriana's arrogance. Former employees tagged the story on LinkedIn, sharing anecdotes of their entitlement from years past. They were suddenly facing consequences not just in the office, but in the public eye. I watched the notifications explode on my phone. Photos of Adriana awkwardly manning the front desk. Marco being corrected publicly on shipment errors. Posts going viral with comments like, "Entitlement meets reality." Finally, every post reinforced the lesson I had orchestrated. Privilege without effort is meaningless, and the world now witnessed it firsthand. For the first time, Marco and Adriana felt the weight of accountability. Marco, who once refused deliveries, now carried boxes while clients watched. Adriana, who once ignored customers, now apologized for every small mistake, visibly shaken. I realized that the satisfaction wasn't just personal revenge, it was teaching them the value of respect, hard work, and humility in a way no private conversation ever could. As they left the office that evening, heads bowed, they finally whispered a word I had waited decades to hear. "We understand, Dad." The world had watched, the lesson was clear, and justice, humiliating yet perfectly fair, was complete. The office was finally quiet. Marco and Adriana had left, humbled, heads bowed, as the world watched their fall from entitled heirs to employees starting at the bottom. I sat back in my chair, savoring the silence, sipping my coffee, and reflecting on what had just unfolded. It wasn't just about revenge, I thought. It was about teaching lessons that couldn't be taught any other way. Reflection on the plan, 3530 to 3700. For decades, I had poured my life into Delgado Imports. I sacrificed sleep, comfort, and personal time to provide my children with opportunities. And for decades, they had assumed that success and inheritance were their birthright, ignoring the blood, sweat, and wisdom behind the business. The sale to Prestige Imports and the cleverly crafted minimum wage clause weren't cruel. They were necessary lessons. Entitlement has consequences. Privilege without effort is meaningless. Respect and hard work are earned, not given. I had orchestrated the perfect balance of justice, humor, and irony, ensuring that they fully understood the lesson. Through this experience, I gained more than satisfaction. My decades of hard work were recognized and appreciated, publicly and privately. I reclaimed control over my life and legacy, demonstrating that wisdom outweighs entitlement. I finally felt peace, knowing my children had learned humility the hard way. The viral attention, while amusing, was secondary. The real victory was in seeing them experience growth, embarrassment, and accountability simultaneously. Scrolling through news mentions, social media posts, and private messages from friends who admired the clever plan, I realized something profound. For once, I was seen, not as the parent who provides, but as a person whose life and work demand respect. I allowed myself a quiet laugh, remembering the smug expressions my children wore before reality hit. The irony, the justice, and the satisfaction were perfectly aligned.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one on the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.